Welcome to an event that we are really excited to be offering to you. My name is Florangela Davila. I'm the news director at KNKX, and I want to thank you for taking an hour of your day to join us at an event that I hope will leave you feeling smarter and more engaged. One quick note, we are recording this event for online and broadcast purposes. Earlier this year, KNKX launched an initiative called Take the Mic. It was an effort to bring more youth voices to our airwaves, led by our youth and education reporter, Ashley Gross, and our engagement and outreach director, Aaron Hennessy. Take the Mic lets us hear the perspective and viewpoints of young people in their own words. We're proud to introduce you to individuals of what can sometimes be a community that gets overlooked. And we're happy that series has brought us to this event today. Our thinking behind this event was threefold. How do we add to the conversation surrounding the election? How do we talk about leadership in a fresh way? And how do we give the mic to young people? Young people make up a projected 37% of the 2020 electorate, yet historically they vote less than any other age group. But we have seen their engagement and their passion when it comes to Black Lives Matter and climate change. We see their power in mobilizing, whether it's on TikTok or in the streets. We hear their voices questioning the actions that we all are taking now that will impact their lives in their future. So rather than a candidates forum or a roundtable about the presidential election, we wanted to get at the core of what makes an effective leader. How does somebody govern and take charge on behalf of a constituency with multiple and sometimes competing priorities? How do you make decisions? Where does your judgment come from? And what do you do if you make a mistake? Our speakers represent the spectrum of civic leadership. And because they are not candidates, we're hoping that they can get real. No spin, no untruths, no talking over one another. Just empower us with unfiltered and honest information, analysis, and context. Listen to these 5 interviewers who are from Seattle and Tacoma. They are our future leaders. They have a lot at stake, and they have a lot to say. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Florangela. This is live, so hey, we're going with it. We're going with it, and we're doing it. But I want to say again, to echo what Florangela said, just thank you to everybody who is participating in this today. Thank you to everybody who is watching or listening. You could be watching or listening to anything else in the world today, and yet you are here with us. And I think you are going to enjoy this afternoon. For those who don't know, my name is Marcus Harrison Green. I am the publisher and founder of the South Seattle Emerald. It is a publication that seeks to elevate the voices of our historically marginalized communities in the region. I'm just absolutely thrilled again to just be here today. We have an outstanding gathering of folks here for you. Just so you know, this event was put together as an acknowledgement that you absolutely cannot tell the full story of our democracy without all of our voices. And that cuts across culture and generations. But you especially can't tell that story unless it includes the voices of our youth. They are our future leaders and future decision makers, as Florangela said, and they will soon be the largest voting bloc and most powerful voting bloc in our country. But right now, I do want to turn to some present day leaders and decision makers. And so I'd like to introduce, it gives me great pleasure to do so, TreAnna Holiday and Governor Gary Locke. Now, Gary Locke, who was governor of Washington State, and it should be noted, he was the first Chinese American to be elected governor in United States history and the first Asian American governor on the mainland. He was also the US Secretary of Commerce and US Ambassador to China. And in those roles, he has been a leader in the areas of education, employment, trade, healthcare, human rights, immigration reform, privacy, and the environment. Currently, he serves as the interim president of Bellevue College, which is the third largest higher education institution in Washington State, serving nearly 30,000 students annually. Thank you for being here, Governor Locke. And then also gives me great pleasure to introduce TreAnna Holiday, a good personal friend of mine. TreAnna is a true Seattleite who has watched her city change in many ways. She took her creative passion to Howard University, where she studied theater management in her first year of college. Then, through the communication program at UW-Tacoma, she began to understand her value in the field, always wanting to tell the stories she saw before her. In a communities and economics course, she learned about the academic version of displacement gentrification. Through studying abroad and being displaced by gentrification herself, she's now fueled to tell her neighborhood story through film and education while working on the solutions. Working with Africatown Community Land Trust and producing content with Converge Media, these are two of the ways she's begun to do just that. As a steward of community with a passion for storytelling, she brings her ideals to life and strives to help others do the same. Thank you for joining us, TreAnna.
I'd like to introduce Michael Liang, who is a champion of the arts. He knows the power of arts and creatives to transform communities. Michael is the program director of SpaceWorks in Tacoma, which provides space training and resources for artists and creative entrepreneurs. He previously spent 10 years as a designer and creative leader with the National Park Service. He has a BFA in art and design from the University of Michigan and a certificate in natural science illustration from the UW, and is currently finishing his MS in education. Welcome, Michael. Thank you for being here. And our fourth speaker is Tacoma Mayor Victoria Woodards. Mayor Woodards has called the City of Destiny her home for nearly her entire life. She is a proud graduate of Tacoma's Lincoln High School and served as a soldier in the United States Army. Before becoming mayor of Tacoma in 2018, she served for 7 years as an at-large member of the City Council. During that time, she launched the city's Equity and Empowerment Initiative, which led to the establishment of its Office of Equity and Human Rights. She spearheaded the city's Project Peace Initiative, which bridged community members with the Tacoma Police Department, and has worked to more fully engage the city's youth in community decisions by expanding Student Government Day and establishing the Mayor's Youth Commission of Tacoma. We're gonna wanna hear more about that, Mayor. And now to set the tone for this event, we'll have a special reading by Seattle Youth Poet Laureate, Bitaniya Giday.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm gonna read a poem for you all that I curated for a Climate Strike Washington march a couple weeks ago, and it's unnamed, so here we go. In Louisville, Kentucky, the 3 leading causes of death among African Americans is heart disease, cancer, and pulmonary disease, all of them lung-related, caused by smoking, not the ones puffed, but the ones bought and sold, pumping pollution into the air, silently choking every Black child at the doorsteps of every hospital saying, "Doctor, I can't breathe." In Louisville, Kentucky, coal plants sit at the background of barbecues and pickup basketball games, streamline the same pipes from Flint, Michigan, till everything from the water to the soil is poisoned, till everything in their pipelines pollute our bloodlines, until a Black father dies 10 years before he was supposed to, because a county sits too noose tall to believe in climate change, leaves trailing hungry mouths as the factory he lives next to replaces just another worker. See, in Louisville, Kentucky, racism kills Black folk, whether it's the round of bullets emptied into Breonna's body or the poison gas pumped into our lungs. We aren't alive enough to matter while we can still breathe. So when a country tells us we can't be the victims of our own murder trials, we say we know. Wonder how these lungs who so badly want to breathe in a future can be the ones killing us. How a corporation's pocket can get so heavy while stepping on our necks in our neighborhoods. The trees are already gone. The smoke has kept the sun away for years. Our mothers cried to the pace of a countdown in our neighborhoods. The most blackest of things here is to die a seed and bloom from the industrial machines. our ribs holding the most fertile of things, our bodies a garden of revolution, a reminder that each death is irreversible. From the poles to the streets we march, our hearts heavy of eulogies for all that we have lost along the way, but we march because we are still here, loud and angry, each breathing in a movement to breathe out a future. Thank you.
Wow. Bitaniya, thank you so much. I would, if we weren't under time constraints, I would ask you to repeat that. That was magnificent. So thank you very much. I do want to go ahead and start off the night with a quick question for our panel. And I would ask them if they could answer this in just 1 or 2 words briefly. I want to ask you all, right now in this moment, what's keeping you up at night? What are you afraid of, and what is giving you hope? And I know that might be a lot for 1 or 2 questions, but TreAnna, could I start with you on that one?
So you said answer it in 1 or 2 words.
I'll go ahead and yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll go ahead and you can, I'll open it up to a few more words. Yeah, but answer as quickly as you can, however.
Okay, all right. Thanks for amending it a little bit for us. But for me, I'll just be really quick here. You know, this election right now is, I don't really dwell in fear, but I'll say that's what's giving me some cause right now. It's giving me pause. I want to make sure that we are being vigilant right now because the country needs it. It is demanding us to step up and really take this election seriously. And I'll say that what's giving me inspiration is to see the voices of the people out there in the streets, demanding their rights, demanding justice, demanding equity. That is more than inspirational to me to see it on such a global level. It's been unprecedented in this country, and it really gives me a lot of inspiration.
Thank you. Governor Locke, same question to you, sir.
Same thing. I'm thinking a lot about the election, wanting to make sure that people really turn out to vote. What concerns me, though, is whether or not some of the systems in place and the barriers and the restrictions in place are stopping people and making it much more difficult for people to vote. So, for instance, like if there's only one drop box in all of Harris County in Texas serving millions of people, people would have to drive hundreds of miles just to drop off their ballot. So I worry that some of these restrictions are going to make it very difficult for people to vote, people who want to vote, or whether the lines will be so long that when the night is over, people are going to be turned away, even though they've been waiting for 6, 7, 8 hours to vote. And the other thing associated with that is, let's say Vice President Biden wins with 8 million more votes, 10 million more votes than President Trump. But because the votes were in the wrong places, not in the so-called battleground states, and the president wins re-election based on the Electoral College, what will be the reaction of the country and the people if one person actually got 10 million more votes, but is not the next president of the United States?
Yeah, I'm sure that's given plenty of people, keeping them up at night as well. So Michael, same question to you. What is keeping you up at night? And also what's giving you hope in these days?
You asked us to be real, right? So the first thing that came to mind was money. I mean, this is nonprofit reality of like finding the funding, you know, to keep your staff employed and to keep programs going. But broader than that, I would say the issue that I'm really concerned about is climate change. We cannot afford 4 more years of climate inaction. We are at such a tipping point as a world, not just a country. So like for me, like that, we have to change because of that. But what gives me hope and inspiration, you know, does come from nature. We live in such a beautiful part of the country. And anytime I get out onto the coast or into the mountains or into the woods, just to see the world on like geologic time, you know, to see the passing of the seasons, that always fills me with hope and inspiration for the future.
Thank you. And finally, Mayor Woodards, last but not least, certainly, what's keeping you up at night, and what is giving you hope?
I'm going to take my first assignment, which was one word, because I did come up with one word.
Ah, okay.
I did take the assignment seriously. And so I'll tell you the 2 words and then I'll expound just a tiny bit. But what's keeping me up at night? Everything. What's giving me hope is everybody. And so what keeps me up at night is the election. We're going through a budget crisis right now. Is making sure that everybody has food, that everybody has the ability to take care of themselves and their family. It's COVID. So there are a lot of things. So that's why I say everything. But what gives me hope is everyone who is committed to doing this work, not just the 8 council members I serve with, but what gives me hope is looking at this screen at all of you and knowing that behind all of you are the people who are on this call or on this Zoom, and behind all of them are other people, so that there are lots of people out there who are willing to dig in and work to try to make a change in my community that will eventually affect the state and affect this country. So everything and everybody.
All right. Thank you for that.
Our role, Marcus and myself, role here in this event is we're facilitators. We're going to keep track of time. This is really about the interviewers, giving the mic to the interviewers. So we want to make sure they have enough time and space for their questions. So we're going to let our interviewers take it from here, introducing themselves as they ask their questions.
All right, hello everyone. It's an honor to be your first youth interviewer today. My name is Alicia Ng. I am 18 years old, so I'm a first-time voter this year. I am a freshman at the University of Washington, studying international business and diversity. And I've been active in leadership and community advocacy for the past 4 years. And I am also currently working with the Seattle nonprofit Hey Mentor. So my first question for you all today is for Miss TreAnna Holiday and Mr. Michael Liang. So, as young people, it's difficult to feel like we have any influence in the world around us, especially before we are old enough to vote. The adults in leadership and in positions of power today are shaping the world that we will one day be responsible for. So, my question is in 2 parts. First, how do you center youth voices in your decision-making processes and provide a platform for youth to speak their truth? Second, what is the greatest lesson that you've ever learned from interacting with young people? And Ms. TreAnna Holiday, we'll start with you.
Wow, what a great question. First off, I'll say that I think it's important to really take a collaborative approach. It really has been at the center of my work, building off of a relational standpoint from a community that really felt like family in the Central District, and expanding that feeling into the work that we do to bring it to the streets, taking that passion to provide solutions, begin to work on the ground level on what these solutions can look like, and really incorporating youth voice as part of that innovation. We understand that the youth have to have a connection to the work in order to feel like when they go out and they learn, they bring that knowledge back to their communities. And it's so important that, community-based organizations and other institutions really begin to have pathways for young people to do that and experience that work. Through some of our partnerships with some of our development partners, there are internships for architecture and design so that we can provide real opportunities for young people to get educated, get experience hands-on by working hand in hand with some of our development partners. And then for us, we run a lot of our programs specifically for the youth, creating a pipeline that allows them to then get into these higher wage jobs, livable wage incomes once they graduate. What does it look like for them to have, access to trade and to do other things that maybe aren't a 4-year college track, but really expanding those opportunities for the youth. So I feel like that was your first question. I want to make sure I get to the second one. Can you just say the second one really quickly again?
Yeah, so my second question was just, what is the greatest lesson you've learned from interacting with young people?
Yeah, for me, it's really about the fact that it's so important for young people to have a connection to their elders, to the older generation, to mentors that look like them, that come from their same backgrounds, that come from their same lived experiences. I have witnessed so much personally in my life where, you know, youth are so inspired by somebody who was just like them, that maybe made it out, that did something different with their time, with their life, with their energy force. And for me, that is inspiring for me. It's something that I've been able to take away from my interactions with youth, that they get so much more when they're really exposed to this generational knowledge that really comes from such a culturally responsive approach. And so I'm inspired by them in that way. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And Mr. Michael Liang, your answer to the same questions.
It's also strange just to be on the other side of this. I feel like I was in your position not too long ago. And I've had a great opportunity to work with a lot of interns over the years. So I'll answer maybe your second question first. I think the thing that I've learned most from youth is to not let go of idealism and urgency. And there is a little bit of, not necessarily jadedness that happens over time, but sometimes the realities of the real world kind of wear on you. And so every time I work with a young person, a high school student, a college student, and see the world through their eyes, and everything's possible. And I need to remind myself of that, and that things can actually move faster than you think they can. So thank you for reminding me and my peers of that. In terms of how we center youth, in terms of the work that we do, so Spaceworks has a business incubator, we do public art, and in my mind, that is open to everyone. But I think that we tend to work with more adults. And so that is a reminder that even though you feel like your door is open and accessible to everyone, that you have to intentionally and proactively recruit and work with the people who perhaps don't know that that door exists in the first place. So what I've been trying to do is to get out of this cubicle world, or our home offices, and interact with some of my colleagues and some of my partners. And I recently did have a meeting with a young college student, and we just chatted for about an hour, learning about her professional development, her growth, her career aspirations. And she had the most wonderful email that she sent afterwards about how much that meeting meant to her. And for me, it was an hour of my time, and to be attentive and to listen, and to not come into those meetings with all the solutions, but to learn from them. And she gave great feedback on us as an organization on what we could do. So I think in a nutshell, not waiting for youth to try to find you, but it's our responsibility to actively go out and listen.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And with that, I'll pass it off to Maeve.
Hi, I'm Maeve Glackenkoli. I'm 17 and I'm currently a junior at Stadium High School in Tacoma. And I'm a member of multiple youth leadership boards, such as Greater Tacoma Community Foundation's Youth Philanthropy Board and the Tacoma Mayor's Education Committee. So with that, my first question is actually for you, Mayor Woodards and TreAnna Holiday. My question comes in two parts, and they are the following. I myself am speaking from an area of immense privilege, both geographically, being from Tacoma's north end, which in itself is a direct result of a systemic racism in the form of redlining, and I'm also white, which in itself comes with so much privilege. So I want to know, who do you guys think are the most marginalized group in Tacoma or in your community? And how do you make sure when you're advocating for something that you're keeping the youth of that group in the forefront of your mind, since they are often overlooked? And Mayor, you can go first.
Because I'm probably one of the oldest people on this call, I had to write it down so I would remember it and not forget it halfway through. But first of all, let me say thank you to all of you for allowing me to be here with you this afternoon and to have this opportunity, and I'll jump right in. We talk about who's most marginalized. I think there are two ways to look at it. One, I think that African Americans, people of color, and indigenous groups in our community are most marginalized. But I also think there's another group of people who are marginalized, and that's the group that we talk a lot about in Tacoma called ALICE, and that's defined through the United Way of Pierce County as someone who is asset limited, income constrained, and employed. So somebody who gets up every day and tries to make a difference for themselves and their family, but can't do that in our current environment. And when I say current environment, not the current environment that just is COVID and the systemic racism, but just the current environment and the state of the world. So I think that's who's most marginalized. When we think about our youth, and so let me be very clear when I talk about youth, and maybe you know this from my youth commission, I do not ever say youth are our future. It's just a personal belief. I don't, because that implies that we can't engage you to sometime in the future for me. And to me, you are our present. You can be leaders and make decisions and give input right now, today, whether you're 18 and old enough to vote, or whether you're 14 and just thinking about what you want life to be like when you get out of high school. So that's why I started the Mayor's Youth Commission, is because I wanted to engage young people in the policies that we're making. You shouldn't just have to inherit what we decide. You should be able to have a say in what you inherit. So for me, and your second question is how do we engage youth? I do it through our youth commission, but I do it not just through a formal meeting of our youth commission. I do it just like Michael said. I sit down and talk with youth whenever I can. If I'm out in public, not very much right now, but in the moments that I am, I love hanging out and talking to young people, because I think we can learn so much about what we want the world to be and what they want to have. And so for me, it's who's most impacted. I explain that. And how do I engage young people? Don't you all just like to be talked to and heard? I mean, I should say talk to you, just like somebody sit and listen and have a conversation with you, and we can learn so much from that.
Thank you so much. And Ms. Holliday, the question is now on to you. Who do you think are most marginalized in your community? And how do you keep the youth of that group in the forefront of your mind when advocating for something?
Thank you so much. These are great questions, you guys. And thank you for your answer too, Mayor Woodard. This is great, being on this call with all of you. I'll say that I definitely think that there are people in our community who have just been overlooked. I mean, seriously, overlooked. And I think that they are the most marginalized. I will say folks that have been displaced due to gentrification. It is at the heart of my work. And it is, again, as said in my bio, I am a person who experienced that firsthand wholeheartedly. And I think it is a travesty that, unfortunately, when we talk about the progression of cities and the progression of neighborhoods and communities, that unfortunately people have not been at the center of that design. It is just now becoming to be a part of architecture and design work at the collegiate level. But it wasn't. When I was going to school and I was studying urban studies, it was still such a foreign idea. You know, I was able to travel abroad to see it in action in Europe and throughout Europe, where they have these human-centric designs that are really focused on the people of the area and how you build for what they need and what their needs are, and how you actually center them as a voice in the design. So I think that folks in general that have really been legacy community members in a lot of these gentrified areas throughout Washington, throughout King County, throughout Pierce County, now it's really spreading. It's unfortunate because they are important. And when design comes in and wipes away all of the history and builds up new buildings and says, this is bright and shiny, this is better than what was there, and has no recognition for the history, the honor, the legacy, the promises that were there beforehand, it's really an unfortunate thing. So I think for me, you know, folks that just kind of get wiped away in that regard are really the most marginalized right now with this housing crisis. And then for me, the way you really center youth in this work and, you know, ensure that they're engaged in this is by allowing them to understand how things work on a progression of time, putting them into the work. Like I said, having interns be at these development partners, institutions, and at their firms to say, look, we want to learn. We want to learn how to build for our communities. We want to take knowledge and build up what we want to see. We don't want to, you know, kind of on the back of what the mayor said, we don't want to just have to deal with the decisions that everyone else made the generations before us, but yet we want to be looked at and listened to and be a part of the guiding decision factors for how things are built in our communities. And I think that that's really important. I think giving youth opportunities to do so by engaging them at the community engagement level on these design processes, when, you know, big developments are going through their design, it's important to have youth at those engagement sessions. It's important to direct marketing to make sure that youth want to come. We have to be better at that. When it comes to certain industries, we have to come at the level that youth are at. If it means we need to be on Snapchat and TikTok and find a way to create fun ads so that we're engaging youth to be a part of these processes, we definitely need to utilize those tools to make sure that we're centering youth in this work.
Thank you both so much, especially for your commitment to youth being the present and not just the future. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Brooklyn.
Hello, my name is Brooklyn Hose. I'm 18 years old and a freshman at the University of Washington, Seattle. I have a current interest in English, business, and ethnic studies. I'm also a local artist in Tacoma, and in my work, I enjoy to emphasize the importance of empowering the voices of the underrepresented and marginalized. So my question today is for Governor Locke and Michael Liang. It's hard to imagine a leader or someone in a position of power saying they don't have integrity, that they aren't thinking of the consequences of their actions. But the reality is that high-stake decisions are often difficult and messy. Given that, what does doing the right thing mean to you?
Well, I think for me, first of all, I want to thank KNKX and South Seattle Emerald for hosting this, and to both Marcus and Florangela. Really appreciate it. And I have to say that I'm in awe of all the people being interviewed and the eloquence, and I've really learned a lot. And the questions are very, very probing and pretty tough questions. So Brooklyn, you've asked a really tough question. I think integrity to me means really just trying to do your very, very best, knowing that you can't please everybody. You know, like we strive to do the very best, but we know that oftentimes we will fall short. I mean, not every baseball team can win every single game. We're not perfect as parents. We're not perfect as spouses or life partners. And, you know, we're going to make mistakes, but you have to, integrity really means having a firm foundation, a set of principles. And each person will have a different set of principles that guide them, but having a firm set of principles and trying to live by those principles. And hopefully those principles are ones that take into account the community and trying to, you know, enrich people's lives and make lives better. And you know, people might focus on, let's say my emphasis is going to be on the environment, or my emphasis is going to be on education, or my emphasis might be on human services and things like that. You try to do as much as you can, knowing that you also bring a certain expertise and your own personal passions to the job in government. But you really try to do the best you can, and you really try to serve as many people as you can. But knowing that we're not perfect, and you hope that you will try to learn from your mistakes and bring voices in from the community to constantly educate you, to give you a different perspective. Oh, I didn't think about it that way. Or I didn't know that this policy was going to impact a group this way, and I didn't mean to. So yes, please tell us how we can improve. And so I think in the end, you have to feel good about what you actually accomplished, and hope that people will also believe that while you were there in whatever role. I mean, you don't have to be elected official, You could be an appointed official. You can be a bureaucrat. You can be an office worker. You can be the leader of a nonprofit, but you hope that you've actually impacted people's lives and carried out your mission in a way that has benefited people.
This is such a good question. And I would say this is one of those questions that keeps me up at night at 3 o'clock in the morning. And doing the right thing, you can ask that in so many different ways. What is the right thing for me as Michael Liang? What's the right thing for my community? What's the right thing that my parents raised me to do? And so I think about, like, you know, the work that I do, the work my team does, and I kind of ask different questions. I look at that work through different lenses. Is this safe? Is this financially sustainable? Is this equitable or just? Is this aligned with our mission? Do we have the capacity to do this? Is there a need within the community? And how do I know that there's a need within the community? Does this further our long-term goals? Are we the best ones for the job? Like, literally like a list that I had written down at some point. And obviously though, I think you're probably realizing that maybe I'm an overthinker. And what happens is that you kind of get to this analysis paralysis. And one of the things that I've had to learn as a leader is that sometimes you just have to make a decision. And it might not be the right decision. And maybe the right decision doesn't exist. And so then what that shifts though is that you make a decision and you accept that there's consequences. And what are those consequences? And are you prepared to deal with those consequences? So sometimes making no decision, that's the worst thing you can do. You just have to you have to make that decision and then move forward and accept the responsibility.
Thank you. I love your guys' responses. I'm going to hand it off to Bitaniya now.
Thank you, Brooklyn. So hi, my name is Bitaniya Giday. I'm 17 and I'm the current Seattle Youth Poet Laureate, as well as founder of East Side for Black Lives, a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Youth Ambassador, and co-chair of Bellevue's Youth City Council. So my question for today is for Governor Locke and Mayor Woodards. So there have been months of Black Lives Matter protests here over the murder of George Floyd, but also in protests of local killings like Manuel Ellis, who died in Tacoma police custody with the same last words of "I can't breathe." So young Black and brown people are leading this movement, organizing on the streets and in meetings. But what I've noticed is I've heard elected officials all the way from Bellevue to Seattle tell us that they hear us, that they've seen us, and that they're with us, but when it's time to make decisions, fail to deliver. How do you each make sure that when you are behind closed doors and making decisions, that you are accountable and as passionate as when you are in public protesting or talking to community members? So since this is kind of an extension of what you earlier mentioned, Mayor Woodards, you can go first.
Hope you need to unmute Mayor Woodard.
Okay, thank you for that. I keep forgetting to unmute, and I don't know why that is because I'm on 100 Zoom calls. So first of all, let me say this. I try not to make decisions in private. I mean, I really try to have that dialogue in public, the same dialogue that I have in public with youth at a rally, or the same dialogue I try to have on the dais, right? And I would say, you know, this has been a really hard time for this country, and a really hard time, not just for the country, because I never thought we'd be having, it's great when we march in our city about what's happening across the country. It's another thing when we march in our city about something that happens in your city. And so I feel this has been I don't want to say interesting, but this has been a difficult year to not only face the turmoil that's been happening across the country, but to see that turmoil happen right here in my city, and to be a Black woman who is leading the city in this time. And so I think for me, the passion that I bring to this job comes from my heart and from a place of authenticity. And people who know me here in Tacoma know that I don't just leave it, I don't leave it downstairs when I come upstairs, or I don't just leave it in the car when I get out of the car. It is with me all the time. And I try, you know, the earlier question, one of the things I forgot to say was like, how do I keep the youth in mind? So it's kind of like, how do I keep the people who are affected by this issue in mind? I am that person. I could have very easily been Breonna Taylor at home in my house. And that person is me. When we think about people being poor, I was a poor kid who grew up in Tacoma. So that person is me. So when I think about that voice as I'm making that decision and having that fight or that conversation about policy, I'm living out my truth and my life, but also representing those who look like me. Now, what I will say on the other end, and this is where it gets extremely difficult, because what I would like to do and by law, what I can do, are two completely different things sometimes. And that is the tension that happens with a lot of this work. Victoria Woodards would like to make some decisions today that I can't make by law. And so part of it comes in this work. We're going through a transformation process in Tacoma. One of the things that we vowed to do is that this transformation will be community-led. And by letting community lead the transformation, then community not only understands what it is they want to do, but how to get it done. And they also recognize that the city is not the only place the laws are made. The city is enforcing laws that are at the state, and the cities are trying to change laws that are at the federal level. So we talk about qualified immunity. I can't fix that in Tacoma. It's not part of what we can do with policies. But I can send people to champion at the state level and at the federal level. So not only is it my job to change what I can to make it better, but it's also my job to educate my community and everybody who is demanding change on where they can go to get it, so that they're not just wasting their time yelling at me for something I can't change, but I'm saying, I want to change it, and I'll go with you to the state level. I'll go with you to the federal level to change those things so that we can do something different on a local level.
Yeah, and Mayor Woodard is actually doing a fantastic job. You know, Mayor Woodard says it perfectly. I mean, she is that person. She easily could have been Breonna Taylor and many other people. I can't really say that. And in many ways, Asian Americans are also in a position of privilege. But there are also many parts of the Asian American community that have suffered from systemic racism, and many of the policies that we're seeing at the national level are almost a full cycle return to things that we thought we had overcome 100 years ago, like on immigration policies and the Exclusion Act, and even alien land laws where Asians were not allowed to even own land. And we hear things like, you know, no more international students, all Chinese are spies, et cetera, the Kung Flu virus and the China virus, you know, no more international students, et cetera. And we're seeing that playing out with graffiti and vandalism of Asian businesses and hostility and violence against Asian Americans. Let me just say that with respect to Black Lives Matter and the systemic racism, I think that for the first time, America has finally seen and felt what African Americans and Black Americans have long been complaining about. I mean, when you see the video of 8 or so minutes of George Floyd gasping for air and saying he can't breathe, you know, you strip away all the excuses and all the ambiguity on past incidents of police interaction with Black Americans. You can't say, well, it was dark, or there's no video. We don't know exactly what happened. We don't know what was going in the mind of the police officer. We don't know what the suspect or the person did that may have prompted the police action. You know, there are no witnesses. I mean, so we have to give the benefit of the doubt to the police officer. I mean, this is stark, brutal video for all the world to see. And so America and the rest of the world is finally waking up and appreciating and resonating and having it sink in what Black families have had to deal with for decades, if not centuries. So what are we doing about it? Let me just say that on our campus, as a college president, because I'm not in public office anymore, we've invited the Black employees and students to come up with a plan on what they think needs to be done on the campus. And so I've met with that task force, an ad hoc task force of of Black employees and students, and they've drafted a 10-point framework. And I've sat down with them, and I have publicly in front of the college said that we support that 10-point framework. We are implementing it. We're working with the ad hoc group on the timing and the specifics, but we're moving ahead on it. And so we made that public commitment, and we've already implemented some of their suggestions. Other things, as the task force said, might take a little bit of time, and we need to refine it because they're basic principles. We need a little bit more detail on certain things. But in principle, we've adopted it, supported it publicly, and with some of the elements of the 10-point framework, we're already implementing. And so that's all I can say.
Yeah, thank you both so much for sharing. That was super empowering to hear the other perspective of it. And with that being said, I'm going to pass it off to Dylan.
How y'all doing? My name is Dylan Tran. I'm 22 years young. I'm a full-time educator at Lincoln High School in my hometown of Tacoma. I'm also an alum of Lincoln High School, class of 2016, and an alum of the UW Seattle, class of 2019. I have two separate questions. So the first one goes out to our mayor, Mayor Woodards. As a child of Southeast Asian refugees from Cambodia and Vietnam, brought up on both the hilltop and the east side of Tacoma, how do we know that what's going on right now with the light rail being built in the historically Black neighborhood of Hilltop isn't a repeat of what we see in Seattle's South End? You know, and understanding that Tacoma runs on a city manager, mayor system, right? The constant gentrification and displacement of our people. How do we truly invest in our community without displacing it or selling it out to more wealthy private investors? So that's one question for you. My other question is for former Governor Locke. Also, side note, my mom tells me that she named me Dylan after your son. But I'm like, I was tripping out because I was like, I was born in '98. So I was like, maybe, I don't know. I'm not good at math, but as a person of color who has been elected and appointed to positions with great power and responsibilities, what pathways have you created for a 22-year-old like myself to one day hold office, or my students, right? And what systems did you put in place during your time to ensure that those behind you, those younger than you, would have your support in chasing their dreams of public service and uplifting our peoples? So, Mayor Woodards.
Thank you, Dylan. And I know at some point, if someone who doesn't understand is going to say, the mayor kept throwing up a sign. Anytime somebody says the word Lincoln, I'm a proud Lincoln-aide, that's an L for Lincoln. So we just be very, anytime somebody says it, I got to throw it up. So Dylan, thank you for graduating from Lincoln High School, and thank you for working at Lincoln High School. And thank you for the great question. You know, this has been a conversation that I've had a lot with people. And one of the premises that I start with this conversation is with the story of talking to one of my girlfriends who lives in Hilltop right now, and who lives across, for those who are familiar with Tacoma, who lives across the street from McCarver Elementary School. And we just within the last 4 or 5 years moved all the students out of McCarver, which is in the center of Hilltop, predominantly African American elementary school, and they totally gutted the building and rebuilt it, but kept the shell of the building because of its historical value. And my girlfriend who owns a house lives directly across from there, and she said to me, "So they're building this new elementary school. Whose kids are going to go there?" And I said, "Well, the kids who went there are going to go there." She said, "No, it's a new school. Aren't they going to bus people in from the north end to go to the new school?" And I said, "No, why would you think that?" She says, "Because we're going to get displaced. My taxes are going to go up. I'm going to lose my house." And I'm like, wait a second. Why do we have to always think that investment in our neighborhood means we have to leave? And why do our neighborhoods or places that they call our neighborhoods, why in order for us to be able to afford to live in our neighborhoods, they have to be run down and they have to be subpar? So I challenge us just a little bit, because I think it's like, no, we don't want the investment because we don't want to gentrify our neighborhoods, but we should be able to demand good neighborhoods, good schools, good transportation systems, and still be able to afford to live in the neighborhood. And that's why That's why it's important for city government and lobbying with state and federal government to make sure that we can put things in place that don't displace people, to make sure that as we're making these investments, that city partners in places like the Tacoma Housing Authority, and we have a partnership with Forterra on a brand new piece of land that's in the hilltop, that we're partnering with nonprofits in the city to own the land so that we can really afford to build housing so that people who live in the neighborhood or who want to live in the neighborhood but can't afford to live in other places in the neighborhood can. And I think that those kinds of initiatives and opportunities for us is how we make sure that gentrification does not happen. But I want to be really clear. I don't want us to always think that every time somebody's making an investment to make our neighborhood better, that means that we should lead it, that we should demand investment, that we should demand, because I grew up I grew up in every part of Tacoma, but I lived on the east side and I caught the bus on the corner of 12th and MLK to go to middle school, and I go to church in Hilltop. So I have a deep connection to Hilltop and believe it should be a beautiful neighborhood. It was when I was growing up. I remember there was a bakery in Hilltop. There were lots of things happening there, and it wasn't a completely rundown neighborhood. So I think making those kinds of investments, partnering and making sure that we can buy the land and build things that are affordable for people to stay in their homes, making sure that as the cost of living goes up in the neighborhood, that we're providing jobs in the city so that people can still afford to keep their jobs and live in that neighborhood. And so I think there are just lots of ways that we can make investments in both the community and the amenities in the community. That doesn't mean it has to be run down, but it can still be a good community that people can be proud of, but that they can still afford to live there.
Well, Dylan, tell your mom that we named our son after you. So if you were born in 98, my son Dylan was born in March of 99. So I think, yeah, we heard about your birth, and so we named our son after you. Let me just say that the question was, how do I try to motivate and inspire other young people to run for office and to have big aspirations and dreams, especially in political office? I really tried to be the best governor I possibly could, to be a respected, effective governor, because I really felt that if I did a really good job, that would create more, that I would help push and raise the glass ceiling. First of all, to encourage other people to run for office and say, wow, if he could do it, I can too. And if I really did a good job as governor, then the public would be willing to accept other people of color, and especially young people, not just to run for office, but to win. Because I recall when I was growing up, there were almost no Asian Americans in political office. And there was one person who was a temporary US Senator who had a reputation of falling asleep at hearings and things like that. And so he became kind of a little bit of a laughing stock. And that created a negative image for any person of color to run. And you know, it's kind of unfair. You know, when you look at the majority population, there are good people and bad people, successful CEOs and really outstanding CEOs, and maybe incompetent CEOs and corporations that have run into trouble. But no one would say, oh, because of that one bad person or ineffective person, you know, you must all be bad. But that's a burden that people of color have, that we carry. I mean, there's one person who does something wrong. Oh, the rest of the population, the community remembers that, and it makes it harder for the rest of us to run for office or to try to be, you know, a leader of an organization, whether it's a nonprofit, a business, a college, a university, et cetera, et cetera. And the same thing in politics. At the same time, when I was running for office, people did remember, for instance, a guy named Wing Luke, who was the first Asian American city council member of a major US city. And he died in a plane crash, but people had good, fond memories of him. There was another state legislator many years ago in my area who had run for office, and people felt that, oh, he did a pretty decent job. Oh, okay. So they had a positive image, a positive reflection, recollection, which benefited me, rightly or wrongly, but at least people were open to a person of color running for office. And I was fairly young at the time. And so they were open to that. So I really felt that if I could try to be as good, effective, respected governor as possible, that I would help pave the way for other people to think about and consider running for office, and making it more possible for them to actually win running for office. The other thing that I have tried to do is I really have made it a concerted effort to appoint people of color and women to all different positions in state government. I'm really proud that when I was governor, I had the most diverse cabinet in the state's history. And I picked people for positions who didn't even have a background in that area, who were not an expert in that area, but who were ethical, hard-charging, creative, smart, and leaders. And they ended up making their organizations judged among the very best in America. That's my way of affirmative action, quite frankly. For me, affirmative action is not giving a person a job or admitting them to a college if they're not qualified, but really looking at people you might not otherwise consider, who don't fit the typical mold, but giving them a chance to excel and shine. And so, for instance, judges. Governors get to appoint judges in case someone retires or someone passes away. And you appoint them until the next election, then they have to run for election in their own right. I appointed like over 60 judges, 70 judges, and all but 3 were reelected or elected by the voters the next time they came around. More than 25% were people of color, and more than 50% were women. The other thing that I've really done to really try to motivate and encourage young people to run for office is I've been a speaker and participated and helped host and conduct conferences of training for young people about politics and government, and answering their questions and trying to, let them know about the opportunities, and then appointing people to boards and commissions, including young people and especially people of color. So that's what I've tried to do to really try to make it easier for young people of color to run for office, to be involved in government, and to be successful.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Governor Locke, and thank you so much to all of our panel, from TreAnna to Michael to Mayor Woodards. Thank you so very much for your answers today. And also thank you to our young interviewers for their questions.
Fantastic questions, amazing questions,
yes,
tough questions.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad I didn't have to be the one answering them. So I'm glad that you all did. But before Florangela says goodnight to all of us, we do want to make sure that our young interviewers, I should say younger interviewers, have the final word. Now, I want to ask you all, can you name one thing you want to be able to say about our country a year from now that you cannot say today? And Dylan, since you're from the South End, I'll start with you, brother.
Man, I want to say that we are great, because I think we ain't there yet,
Okay. Maeve, same question.
I was going through a lot of thought processes in my head, but I think I'd like to say that America cares. And by cares, I mean cares about climate change, cares about women, cares about people of color, because no matter how much they say that they do, the politicians, especially those on top, it's been pretty clear in the past year and also in all of America's history that they don't. So yeah, I'd like to say that America cares.
All right, thank you. Alicia?
Okay, this is tough. I would say that as a proud daughter of immigrants and someone who's grown up surrounded by people who have the same experiences as myself, I would love to say in a year from now that our country can recognize that everyone's future is valid and everyone's path to their own future is also valid.
All right, thank you. All right, Brooklyn?
I want to be able to say that our country is united And I mean that from all stances, from every type of background, like that we're united and we understand our role as giving respect to each other and just standing together.
Thank you. And finally, Bitaniya.
Yeah, I think in a year from now, although it's just not a word, I want to say that I'm as hopeful in our politics as I am in our communities.
Thank you. All right, Florangela, take us home.
Gotta catch my breath there. Alicia, Maeve, Dylan, Brooklyn, and Bitaniya, thank you for your words, your perspectives. We need more conversations like this. We need more people. We need this kind of conversation intergenerationally. Governor Locke, Mayor Woodards, TreAnna, Michael, thank you for spending time with us. We couldn't have done this without you. Thank you to Marcus, South Seattle Emerald Herald, South Seattle Emerald, to each of you who have joined us for this hour of amazing conversation beyond what any of us could have imagined, and really powerful. We want to remind you that this event was recorded and will be available soon on KNKX.org. We want to remind you to vote. We want to thank you for supporting local journalism. We really appreciate it, and we want to wish you well. Have a very good night.
Thank you all. Thank you. Great